In the last lesson, let me get rid of this here. In the last lesson, you learned about Etruscan and Greek influences on Rome. Early Rome was ruled by Etruscan kings from northern Italy. In this lesson, you will learn how the Romans overthrew the Etruscans and created a republic around 509 BCE. A republic is a form of government with elected leaders. Ancient Romans told an interesting story about the overthrow of their Etruscan masters. One day, two Etruscan princes went to see the famous oracle at Delphi in Greece. A Roman named Lucius Junius Brutus traveled with them. At Delphi, the prince asked the oracle which of them would be the next king of Rome. The oracle answered, "The next man to have authority in Rome will be the man who first kisses his mother." Hearing the words, Brutus pretended to trip, and he fell on his face, and his lips touched the earth, the mother of all living things. Back in Rome, Brutus led the revolt that drove out the Etruscan kings. He became one of the first leaders of the new republic. In this way, the oracle's mysterious words came true. The Romans were now free to govern themselves, but not all Romans were equal. Power early republic belonged to rich men called patricians. The majority of Romans, the plebeians, had no say in the government. In this chapter, you're going to see how a long struggle between patricians and plebeians shaped the government of Rome. Between 616 and 509 BCE, the Etruscans ruled Rome. During this time, Roman society was divided into two classes, patricians and plebeians. Upper-class citizens called patricians came from a small group of wealthy landowners. Patricians came from the Latin word patres, which means father. The patricians chose the father of the state, the men who advised the Etruscan kings. Patricians controlled the most valuable land. They also held the important military and religious offices. Lower-class citizens called plebeians were mostly peasants, laborers, craftspeople, and shopkeepers. The word plebeians comes from plebes, which means many. Plebeians made up about 95% of Rome's population. They could not be priests or government officials. They had little say in the government, yet still they were forced to serve in the army. Over time, the patricians came to resent Etruscan rule. In 509 BCE, a group of patricians rebelled. They drove out the last Etruscan king. In place of a king, they created a republic. In a republic, elected officials work for the interest of the people. To the patricians, the people meant the patricians themselves, not the plebeians. They put most of the power in the hands of the Senate. The Senate was a group of 300 men that the patricians elected. The senators served for life, and they also appointed other government officials and served as judges. Two elected leaders, called consuls, shared most of the command of the army. The Senate was supposed to advise the consuls. In fact, the Senate's decisions were treated as law. The creation of the Republic gave Rome a more democratic government, but only the patricians could participate in that government. Rome was now a republic, but the patricians held all the power. They made sure that only they could be part of the government. Only they could become senators or consuls. Plebeians had to obey their decisions. Because laws were not written down, patricians often changed or interpreted the laws to benefit themselves. As a result, a small group of families held all the power in Rome. The plebeians had to fight for what they wanted. They began to demand more political rights. The struggle between the plebeians and the patricians was known as the conflict of the orders, or conflict between the classes. The conflict grew especially heated during times of war. The new republic frequently fought wars against neighboring tribes. Plebeians had to fight in the army, even though their patricians decided whether to go to war. Plebeians resented this. The struggle took a dramatic turn in 494 BC. By then, Rome was a city of between 25,000 and 40,000 people. Most of the population was plebeians. Angry over their lack of power, The plebeians marched on the city and camped on a nearby hill. They refused to come back until the patricians met their demands. Rome was in crisis. Work in the city and on the farms came to a halt. Without the plebeians, patricians feared the army would be helpless if an enemy struck Rome. A great panic seized the city, wrote Livy, a famous Roman historian. The patricians had little choice but to compromise. The plebeians' revolt led to a major change in Roman government. The patricians agreed to the plebeians' elected officials called tribunes, or the plebes. The tribunes spoke for the plebeians to the Senate and the consuls. Later, they gained the power to veto or overrule the actions of the Senate government officials that they thought were unfair. Over the time, the number of tribunes grew from 2 to 10. Plebeians could also elect a lawmaking body, the Council of Plebes. However, the council made laws only for plebeians, not patricians. The plebeians had gained some important rights, but they still had less power than the patricians. Over the next 200 years, the plebeians used a series of protests to gradually win political equality. First, they demanded that laws be written down. That way, the patricians couldn't change them at will. Around 451 BCE, the patricians agreed the laws were written down and on tablets called the 12 Tables. Next, in 367 BCE, a new law said that one of 2 Roman consuls had to be a plebeian. Former consuls had held seats in the Senate, so this change also made it possible for plebeians to become senators. Finally, in 287 BCE, the plebeians gained the right to pass laws for all Roman citizens. Now assemblies of all Roman citizens could approve or reject laws. The plebeian assembly also nominated the consuls, the tribunes, and the members of the Senate. More and more plebeians served alongside patricians in the Senate. After 200 years of struggle, the plebeians had won their fight for equality. Rome's republic form of government inspired future ages in Europe and America. Rome set an example of a government ruled by a written constitution, a set of basic laws. Future republics also pointed to Roman ideals of elected assembly, citizenship, and civic duty. They adopted the model of government bodies that could check each other's power. Above all, they were inspired by the spirit of republicanism. Cicero, a famous Roman statesman, captured the spirit when he wrote, "The people's good is the highest law."